Every flow begins with hope, a small click, a bright promise. An email arrives, a Teams message appears. Someone claps, someone says, "Finally." They always cheer at the beginning. No owner named, no logs written, 100 actions stitched like mismatched parts. And then one night it wakes, 6,000 messages before dawn. Threads choke, queues grind, people ask who built this. Silence answers. Here's what actually works, what returns when called, how to bind the orchestrator so it serves, not feeds. One rule: if you break it, it wakes at 3:07 a.m. And something is listening. The entities that listen, triggers that never sleep. Administrator, do you hear that? The quiet hum under your tenant. It's not quiet. It's listening. Some triggers behave. They announce themselves with clean edges. They leave tracks you can follow. When a row is added or modified in Dataverse, it raises a hand. You bind it with an idempotent key. You hold a watermark. You use change tokens, sins, curses, server-side filters. It tells you only what changed, only once. When an email arrives, you pre-filter by subject, by sender, by headers. You gate on status equals ready. You add a trigger condition so noise dies at the door. A scheduled tick, a steady heartbeat, once an hour or once a day, never frantic. You cap it, you name it, you log every beat. When a Teams message is posted, you narrow the channel. You match a keyword. You keep concurrency off until you own a partition key. You refuse to let it fan out without a leash. When a case is created in Dynamics, it's a proper birth, a single source of truth. You trust the table, not the whispers. You record the correlation ID the moment it cries. But some triggers misbehave. They smile, then they slip. When an item is deleted, it leaves nothing but a cold gap. Your flow wakes to an absence, no body, no details, just gone. You thought you could react. You can't, not reliably. The silencer is lying on premises gateway, the haunted bridge. Sometimes it holds, sometimes it sways. Latency crawls in. Retries stack like bones. The bridge doesn't warn you before it drops a step into the river. Recurrence every minute. That is not a pulse. That is a summoning, a loop that calls itself. Your reply to each nudges a record. The record twitches. A new trigger fires, and then another. The quota goes hollow, then empty. Flows triggered by flows. The chain ritual. You say only this once. It says again. One child calls another. A parent reawakens on a status change it created. You didn't set a max depth. You didn't set a gate. You just opened a door. Most people think triggers are simple switches, but triggers are ears. They hear everything. You must teach them to ignore. Guardrails are not decoration. Trigger conditions gate the first breath. If not ready, return to sleep. Pre-filters cut the noise at the source. Property filters only fields that matter or nothing moves. Server-side query, let the data store refuse the crowd before it reaches you. Headers to reduce payload, light steps only, no heavy footprints. Ritual snippet. You will use it like salt on a sill. Equals trigger outputs. Body. Status. Ready. That single line bars the restless from your door. Concurrency off by default. You don't turn it on because it's there. You turn it on when you own a partition key. When you can say, this run touches only this shard. Otherwise, the creature splits and feeds from both hands. Tenant tie-in. You're not alone in the house. DLP walls keep cursed connectors out. Solution-aware flows keep builders from scribbling in the dark. Connections reference service principles, not people who come and go like weather. Owner rotation on schedule, not after the obituary. And when you must listen to busy places, SharePoint libraries that never sleep, pre-filter by path, by column, by a flag you set only once, debounce batch. You're not here to hear every footstep. You're here to hear the right knock. But hearing is nothing without rules to bind what comes next. The ears are open. The house is aware. Now you decide who may enter and how they leave, because the orchestrator is awake. And if you don't bind it, it will bind you. The patterns that survive, protection rituals that hold. Now bind it. Golden rules first, not advice. Law, try. Catch, finally. 3 scopes, 3 circles of salt. In try, you do the work. Nothing clever, just the path you expect. In catch, you tell the truth. Status, stage, error code, the last action that screamed. In finally, you clean the floor. Close handles, end threads. Write the tombstone. Then decide if this run returns or is put down. You log everything, not because you crave noise, because silence lies. Flow name, run ID, environment, trigger, correlation ID, error code, payload hash, person to notify, a link to the run. Append only, never overwrite the past. It remembers, it teaches. Terminate with reason codes. Don't fail, speak. Terminate success when you recover. Retriable when the wind changes. Fatal when the map is wrong. Your dashboards will read this like omens. Your responders will move. Names bind demons. You stop calling things scope 1. You carve names like gravestones. Scope validate request. Scope process order. Scope handle errors. Action get customer. var order id var retry count. When it fails at 3:07 a.m., you don't hunt. You point and you cut. Dynamic content is a stranger. Distrust it. Coalesce every field you didn't create. String, int, bool. Cast a shape before you let it in. Empty on every branch that can go dark. If equals variables vart status. Ready. Nulls are not bugs. They're teeth. Pad the door. Version outside the beast. Export unmanaged. Commit to Git. Tag the release. Note the change. You never ask which version is in prod. The commit tells you. The release notes whisper what changed and why. Control concurrency with a leash off until you hold a partition key. If you own account id, you can split by it. Degree equals throughput math you can defend. 10 shards? Fine. 50? Show your numbers. And when a message poisons the stream, you don't feed it twice. You send it to the side. Your poison queue. You mark it. You move on. You don't stop the river for 1 stone. Child microflows are small creatures. Keep them that way. One job. Stateless. Tiny inputs, tiny outputs. No side effects. You pass a contract, not a story. Child sanitize email. Child create task. Child post Teams alert. Each can be tested alone. Each can be replaced without tearing the house. Prevent feral changes. Lock environment variables. Reference secrets through key vault or service connections, not in the open air. Layer your solutions. Security roles like iron bars. Connection references bound to service principles, not people who vanish at Friday's goodbye call. A flow that depends on a person is a candle in a draft. A flow that depends on a principle is a lantern bolted to stone. Your copy-paste ritual is not a hack, it's memory. A standard scaffold, scope try. Scope catch with has failed, has timed out, is skipped on run after. Compose, workflow, meta, tus workflow. Compose/flow run URL. The long string that stitches environment, id, and run name into a door you can open. Filter failed actions. Convert them into a table you can read at a glance. Post to the team's channel that listens without screaming. Use and mention tokens like bells. 1 person, not 10. Dev and prod, different bells. The right ears wake, then the right. Dataverse audit create with your contract fields. Append only. Calm. If the failure is transient, mark it retriable and set a short back off. If it is permanent, fatal, and end it. The message moves to the poison queue for daylight work. The real secret is simple. You do this everywhere, every flow, every team, every domain. It's boring, it's repeatable, it holds. Now the small warnings that look like dust but cut like wire. Never allow users to change environment variables that steer routing, destinations, or limits. Those are rails, not preferences. Wrap them with security roles. Audit their edits. Alert when they move. Don't auto-generate HTML tables from raw error blobs. You think you're making it readable. You're making it shapeless. Project the fields, action name, message, timestamp, correlation need, 2 columns for HTTP, primary error and secondary path. If the first is empty, the second will speak. Retry is not hope. It's math. Exponential backoff, sealing, circuit breaker. 3 tries for network flinch, 1 for a hard 403. If the breaker opens, you don't keep knocking. You mark, you notify, you stop. The system breathes, and governance flows. Govern. Owner rotation runs monthly. Connections rebind to service principals by policy. Disabled accounts are purged from ownership lists. Orphaned flows are not curiosities. They are ghosts. You end them or you adopt them. Nothing just runs. When you copy this scaffold, do not trim the bones. Developers will ask, can we remove the Teams post for now? No, the house must hear itself. Can we drop the audit insert while testing? No, tests are where habits grow teeth. Finally, remember the rule you don't want. Terminate on purpose. Do not let a run wander in a do until with no hourglass. Do not let a branch skip quietly into the weeds. End it. Name its end. Leave a stone on top. These patterns don't make you safe. They make you ready. The orchestrator respects only structure. Give it names, give it gates, give it records that outlive you. And when it wakes at 3:07 a.m., it will find you prepared. The flows that went wrong. Urban legends from the Tenant. You've heard whispers. Here are the bodies. The loop that ate a tenant. It began with kindness. A SharePoint list. A flow that said, when an item is updated, fix a field. Set status to ready. Simple, except the update woke the trigger. The trigger woke the update. A mirror staring at a mirror. Apply to each nudged each record to clean it. SharePoint dutifully saved. The flow listened again and again. By sunrise, 1 million calls had gone into the dark. API quotas, hollowed, service limits, screaming. Users woke to throttles, errors, and a quiet Teams channel that began to stutter. Remediation, we cut the wire. Bulk cancel the runs. Patch the trigger with a condition. Only act when status changes from not ready to ready. Add a tombstone column, last processed hash, so the creature knows it has fed. Owner reassigned to a service principal. Concurrency capped, and a poison path. The hunger stopped. The approval that never returned. An approver left the team. Their mailbox moved, their calendar changed shape. The flow waited anyway. Day 1, day 30, day 100. 271 days of pending, like a light left on in an empty room. Downstream, SLAs softened, then rotted. People resent, people escalated. The record did not care. It was still awaiting. We tracked the thing by its correlation, We found its grave in run history, a line that said nothing but still waiting. The fix? Backup approver bound by role, not name. Expiration window enforced. On timeout, reassign. On second timeout, escalate and close. Terminate with expired approval so dashboards learn. And at the source, approvals created with adaptive cards that confess when the user is gone. No more polite silence. The dead user's flow. The owner was disabled on Friday. The flow did not notice. Old token, still warm. Every night it sent reports signed by a ghost. When the token finally cooled, it failed, quietly, because no one was listening. The tenant filled with ownerless things, still ticking, still trying. We brought out the rights. Owner reassignment protocol. Inventory of flows by connection owner. Service principal rebinding by policy. A monthly sweep that ends or adopts strays. And a sentinel, a flow that watches for disabled accounts tied to live automations. It writes a warning in Dataverse. It pings the steward. It ends the haunt. Cost shadows. Runaway retries. Premium connectors billed by the breath. An on-prem gateway flinched. Recurrence hit again. Calls stacked. Azure consumption rose like a tide you pretend not to see. We pulled logs from audit. We traced correlation through log analytics. We saw the same error, echoed 100 times. Remediation? Circuit breakers, back off with ceilings. Retriable only for a minute. Then fatal, then notify. The bill quieted. Forensics live where the bodies lie. Run history gaps tell you when the bridge dropped. Correlation IDs lead you from the trigger to the last scream. Audit logs, log analytics. That's where the names are. The kit is simple. Bulk cancel, owner rebind, connection rotate, trigger patch, cap recurrence, and then a line in the ledger so the house remembers why the door is locked. The patterns that actually work, binding rituals for real teams. Administrator, this is where the noise fades. Not by chance, by design. Reliable designs first. Intake, validate, route, 3 doors, 1 direction. Intake gathers, it does not decide. It accepts a payload, stamps a correlation ID, checks a signature, and writes a single thin record into Dataverse, flow name, run ID, trigger, payload, hash, status, received. That's the mark. From there, validation runs like a quiet clerk. Required fields, present. Data types, cast, references, resolve or reject. No side effects yet. If it passes, routing decides which task router takes the case. If it fails, terminate with invalid input. Write the tombstone, notify the steward once, and let the house stay calm. Dataverse is your spine, the source of truth, not a rumor. When you route by Dataverse, you avoid double work. You look up by key. You coalesce missing fields. You guard with alternate keys, so idempotence is baked in. You never update the same record twice without checking the watermark. The table remembers, run to run. Task routers are light, deterministic. They read a rules table, no branching labyrinths inside the flow. They choose a path by a clause. Type equals sales and region equals NA, child sales onboard. And they do not send emails, they do not create tasks. They point, that's all. No side effects means no ghosts. Child microflows do the work. Tiny. Contract driven. You pass only what they need. They return only what you asked. Status, output ID, and a small note. If they fail, they speak a code. Retriable external 503. Fatal bad mapping. The orchestrator listens to codes, not vibes. It decides the next breath. Retry math sits beside them like a metronome. Exponential backoff with a ceiling you can say out loud. For 503, maybe 10s, 30s, 60s. Then circuit breaker opens. You mark the record, paused, write the retriad, and stop pushing. A timed watcher wakes later, checks the breaker, and tries again, or closes the book with fatal, and a ping to the steward. No run loops in the dark, no desperate hammering at a dead door. Termination paths are named, not guessed. Success writes done, with an end timestamp and MTTR ticks. Retriable writes held, with next attempt. Fatal writes dead, with a reason you can filter in a dashboard at 2 p.m. or 3:07 a.m. The dashboards breathe because the codes are clean. Notifications live in one place, a Teams channel that hears, not screams. The post includes the flow run, URL, correlation ID, and a short table. Action, message, error path. It mentions one role or one person chosen by environment. Dev, test, prod, different bells. The right ears wake, everyone else sleeps. Audit entries go to Dataverse. Append only, never overwrite. That's how MTTR drops. Run ID to trigger to failure to resolution. The line forms a spine you can follow with a single query. And if you push to log analytics, you can hunt by correlation ID across services without guessing where the shadow moved. Now, the rooms where this holds. Sales. Onboarding microflows that create tasks, set SLA timers, and schedule reminders. Intake writes the lead. Validate verifies email and account. Router sends by region and product. Child flows create the tasks in Dataverse or Dynamics. A timer child watches the due date. If a task lingers, it posts a quiet nudge in Teams with the record link once, then escalates. Failure rate drops because each child only does one thing. API calls fall because nothing retrieves in panic. The log tells you where time slipped. Service auto-classify email and escalate high-priority cases. The intake listens to exchange with strict pre-filters, subject and sender, yes, but also a keyword list stored in Dataverse. Validation casts the body, strips noise, and calculates a hash. If the hash matches the last processed payload, the flow steps aside. The router assigns to a queue by product. A child calls a model to score severity. Critical gets an immediate Teams post with mention to on-call. Normal gets a task. Retries for exchange hiccups happen in the watcher, not in the main run. Your queues stop swallowing the same scream twice. HR. Staged approvals that don't wait forever. The router chooses a path by job family. Child request approval posts an adaptive card with an expiration window. If it times out, child reassign finds a backup approver by role, not name. Calendar-aware windows prevent asking at 2 a.m. Each path writes its own termination code. Expired approval. Reassigned. Approved. MTTR drops because you can see which stage failed without opening the run. Security. Compliance checks with Purview, orphaned teams, and SharePoint cleanup. Azure AD lifecycle hooks feed the intake. User disabled. License removed. Group changed. Router sends cleanup team, archive site, lock share. Child flows perform the work idempotently. If the site is already archived, they return success without pretending to act. A purge engine runs on a schedule. It cancels hanging runs older than a rule. It archives payloads past retention. It deletes stale connections. It rotates owners back to service principles if a hand strayed. The haunt ends because the house keeps closing doors. Copy-paste kits make this real. A child flow contract template, a Teams message template with URL composer, a Dataverse audit create JSON block, and a guide that says naming schema, try, catch, scaffold, router rules, error codes. You don't invent the ritual every time. You repeat it. That's how fear leaves. And the numbers change. API cut by a third, sometimes more. Failure rates from noisy 18% to quiet under 2, MTTR sliding under 10 minutes because the first ping points straight to the wound. Costs stop climbing. The tenant sleeps. If you follow the marks, the house stays quiet. The dark patterns, things that never come back. Some shapes don't return. They slip into the crawl space, and when they move, the walls crack. One flow with 300 actions. No, that's not a flow. That's a maze. You don't debug mazes. You get lost in them. Split by concern. Compose a score, not a scream. Orchestrator above. Task rotors between. Child microflows below. Anything else feeds the dark. Do until with no timeout. Never. That is a candle in a room with no air. It burns until it eats the table. Always add cap, delay, escape hatch. 5 tries. Back off. Circuit breaker. If it forgets to stop, you didn't build a loop. You built a trap. Apply to each on large lists with concurrency. It feels fast. It is not. It is a stampede. Shard by partition keys. Paginate on the server. Filter where the data sleeps, not where your flow wheezes. Let each shard touch only its own row. Then, and only then, raise the degree. Excel as a trigger. Never. Excel remembers, and it punishes. Files lock. Rows shift. Tables break when someone fixes formatting. Use Dataverse or SharePoint lists for state. Import from Excel. Do not listen to it. The sheet lies. SharePoint, busy, library triggers. They never sleep. Pre-filter by path, by content type, by a flag you control. Batch updates. Debounce change storms with a watermark column that moves only when you say. If you listen to every footstep, you'll never hear the knock. Approvals with zero error logic. That's not a request. That's a plea thrown into wind. Add escalation. Backup approver by role, expiration and reassign, terminate with named codes. If no one answers, the flow answers for them, and it ends. Hard-coded URLs and personal owners. That's a love letter to a future outage. Put URLs in environment variables. Lock them. Bind connections to service principles. Rotate owners on a schedule. People leave, services don't. Chain ritual flows with no guard. Flows triggering flows, calling back their parents, waking themselves on their own edits. Add trigger conditions, idempotency keys, max depth. If a run can see its reflection, blind it. Some patterns look brave. They are bait. Leave them in the dark. The orchestrator blueprint, the safe architecture. Now, the warding, the blueprint that turns noise into work and work into quiet. Master orchestrator. It listens once, only once. It deduplicates on site. Payload hash or alternate key and stamps a correlation id that will not change. It logs the intake in Dataverse, flow name, run it, env trigger hash status equals received. Then it routes by type and environment. No side effects yet. The master's hands are clean. Task routers, light, deterministic. Their rules live in Dataverse so humans can edit without cutting wire. If type il sales and region il NA send to child sales on board. If severity equal critical, send to child notify on call. Routers don't post, they don't write, they point, then pass. Child microflows, tiny, idempotent, contract-driven. You hand them the minimum. They return. Status, output ID, reason code. No global state, no "oh, while I'm here." Per domain. Sales, service, HR, SecOps, each tested alone. Each replaceable without tearing the house. Error hub, a Dataverse audit table. Append only. Severity, stage, reason code, flow run URL, correlation ID, person to notify, workflow meta. It accepts writes from every child and every router. It feeds the dashboard without asking anyone to check the run. Purge plus retention engine, the keeper. It cancels hanging runs past a rule. It archives payloads beyond retention. It deletes stale connections. It rotates owners back to service principals if someone drifted. It clears poison queues into daylight work. It keeps the house from filling with bones. Monitoring, a dashboard that always watches, failed runs, high-frequency triggers, ownerless flows, disabled flows, top API burners, MTTR, slice by reason code, drill by correlation ID, from whale to wound in one click. Governance shell, environments, dev, test, prod, DLP walls that keep cursed connectors out. Solution only build, COE starter kit, signals to harvest inventory. Log analytics for the long trail. Azure AD lifecycle hooks to catch the moment a user goes dim. Copilot as scribe, it reads the error hub. It writes the narrative with timestamps. At 0211 router requeued due to circuit breaker. It suggests fixes. It links to runs. It is not the handler. It's the chronicler you wish you had at 3:07 a.m. Copy-paste assets, a naming schema that binds daemons, a try-catch template, the Dataverse schema, the dashboard layout, the orchestration design guide. These are charms, not trinkets. Use them as written. Metrics arc, the proof that the noise fades. API cut by 30 to 70%. Failure rate from 18 to under 2. MTTR under 10 minutes. Cost curves flatten across licensing and Azure consumption. Not luck, structure. With structure, the noise fades. Without it, everything loops. One truth, the tool isn't the monster. Neglect is. The gaps, the unlocked doors in a silent house. If you want the charms, the naming schema, the try-catch scaffold, the Dataverse audit table, the dashboard layout, the Orchestrator blueprint, take them. Subscribe and watch the deeper build. Keep them close. Build carefully, or the machine will finish the work long after you are gone.